Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another reading from Paradise Found by William F. Warren today, and I'm going to be sharing part 3, chapters 6 and 7, because they're both relatively short chapters. I want you to remember, as I am reading this, that the author of this did follow the heliocentric model. So just keep that in mind as I am reading that these are not my words, these are the words of this author. So let's get started. Chapter 6, The Testimony of Paleontological Zoology. All the evidence at our command points to the northern hemisphere as the birthplace of the class Mammalia, and probably of all the orders. Alfred Russel Wallace. But in settling the site of Eden, the animal kingdom must also have a voice. According to the Hebrew story, the representatives of this kingdom were an earlier creation than Adam, and in Eden was the world fest of their christening. Evidently, the lost cradle of humanity must be fixed in time posterior to the beginnings of animal life, and in space so located that from that spot as a center, all the multitudinous species and genera and orders and families of the whole animal creation might have radiated forth to the various habitats in which they are respectively found. Now, it is one of the striking facts connected with zoology that if we pass around the globe on any isothermal line at the equator, or in any latitude south of it, or in any latitude north of it, until we come to the confines of the Arctic zone, we find, as we pass from land to land, that the animals we encounter are specifically unalike. Everywhere we find, along with like climatic and telluric conditions, different animals. The moment, however, we reach the Arctic zone and there make the circuit of the "globe," we are everywhere surrounded by the same species. On the other hand, if we take great circles of the Earth's longitude and pass from the Arctic region down along the continental masses of the New World to the South Pole, thence returning up a meridian which crosses Africa and Europe, or Australia and Asia, we shall find in the descent abundant fossil evidence that we are moving forward on the pathway along which the prehistoric migrations of the animal world proceeded. While on our return on the other side of the planet, we shall find that we are no longer following in the track of ancient migrations, but are advancing counter to their obvious movement. All this is as true of the flora of the world as it is of the fauna. Hence the language of the late Professor Orton. Only around the shores of the Arctic Sea are the same animals and plants found through every meridian, and in passing southward along the three principal lines of land, specific identities give way to mere identity of genera. These are replaced by family resemblances, and at last even the families become in a measure distinct, not only on the great continents, but also on the islands, till every little rock in the ocean has its own peculiar inhabitants. Another well-known naturalist says, "It should also be observed that in the beginning of things, the continents were built up from north to south. Such has been at least the history of the North and South American and the Europeo-Asiatic and the African continents. And thus it would appear that north of the equator, at least, animals slowly migrated southward, keeping pace, as it were, with the growth and southward extension of the grand land masses, which appeared above the sea in the Paleozoic ages. Hence, scanty as is the Arctic and temperate region of the earth at the present time, in former ages these regions were as prolific in life as the tropics now are. The latter regions, now so vast, having through all the tertiary and quaternary ages, have been undisturbed by great geological revolutions, and meanwhile been colonized by emigrants, driven down by the incoming colds of the glacial period. As long ago as 1876, Mr. Alfred Russel Wallace wrote, "All the chief types of animal life appear to have originated in the great north temperate or northern continents, while the southern continents have been more or less completely isolated during long periods, both from the northern continent and from each other." And again, speaking of Mammalia, he said, "All the evidence at our command points to the northern hemisphere as the birthplace of the class and probably of all the orders. From all the facts, but one conclusion is possible, and that is that, like as the Arctic Pole is the mother region of all plants, so it is the mother region of all animals, the region where, in the beginning, God created every beast of the earth after his kind, and cattle after their kind, and everything that creepeth on the earth after his kind. And this is the conclusion now being reached and announced by all comparative zoologists who busy themselves with the problem of the origin and prehistoric distribution of the animal world. But to believe that Professor Heer's Miocene Arctic continent was the cradle of all floral types and the cradle of all faunal forms, and yet deny that it was also the cradle of the human race, is what few philosophical minds are likely long to do. Chapter 7: The Testimony of Paleontological Anthropology and Ethnology. Man is the one traveler who has certainly been in the cradle of the human race. He has come from the land we are seeking. Could we but follow back the trail of his journeyings, it would assuredly take us to the garden of pleasantness from which we are exiled. Unfortunately, the traveler has lost whole volumes of his itinerary, and what remains is in many of its passages not easy of decipherment. What says anthropologic and ethnic paleontology, or what some French writers are beginning to call paleo-ethnique science, respecting the hypothesis of a polar Eden? At the time when the present writer began his university lectures on this subject, the teachings of professed anthropologists were in the chaotic and contradictory condition indicated in Part First. One of the strongest proofs he could then find that a new light was able to dawn on this field was in their cited work of quatrophages entitled The Human Species. Accordingly, in discussing the probable verdict of this science upon the admissibility of the new theory of human distribution, the lecturer presented the following paragraph, and there rested the case. Anthropology, as represented by quatrophages, seems to be actually feeling its way to the same hypothesis. This writer first argues that in the present state of knowledge we should be led to place the cradle of the race in the great region bounded on the south and southwest by the Himalayas, on the west by the Bolar Mountains, on the northwest by the Alatau, on the north by the Altai Range and its offshoots, and on the east by the King Khan, on the south and southeast by the Phalina and Quen Lun. Later on, however, he says that paleontological studies have very recently led to results which are capable of modifying these primary conclusions. And after briefly stating these results, he starts the question whether or no the first center of human appearance may not have been considerably to the north of the region, just mentioned, even in polar Asia. Without deciding, he adds, perhaps prehistoric archaeology or paleontology will someday confirm or confute this conjecture. The cautious anticipation here expressed was quickly fulfilled. At the concluding lecture of the same first course, it was possible to present the following as the ripe conclusion of a fellow countryman of quatrophages, one of the foremost savants of Europe, Count Saporta. We are inclined to remove to the circumpolar regions of the north, the probable cradle of primitive humanity. From there only could it have radiated as from a center, to spread into the several continents at once, and to give rise to successive emigrations toward the south. This theory best agrees with the presumed march of the human races. In the foregoing, we have more than a demonstration of the bare admissibility of our hypothesis. We have in it the latest word of anthropological science respecting the birthplace of the human race. To make it a complete confirmation of our theory, so far as this field of knowledge is concerned, but one thing is lacking, and that is a clearer recognition of the great natural revolution or catastrophe which destroyed man's primitive home and occasioned the worldwide post-diluvian dispersion. This lack, however, is abundantly supplied by the foremost German ethnographers, and even by such as represent the most radical Darwinian views. Thus, Professor Friedrich Müller of Vienna and Dr. Moritz Wagner, both of whom placed the probable cradle of the race in some high latitude in Europe or Asia, lay the utmost stress upon the mighty climatic revolution which came in with the glacial age, ascribing to it the most stupendous and transforming influences that have ever affected mankind. In our view, the deterioration of natural environment reduced the vigor and longevity of the race. In theirs, it changed one of the tribes of the animal world into men. Which of these views is the more rational may safely be left to the reader's judgment. Few will be disposed to accept the doctrine that man is simply a judiciously iced pithecoid. That's all that I'm going to be reading today. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my YouTube membership, I will leave a link in the description box for that, or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.